And we're going to let Irene get started. Let me mute my.
Okay, so am I on, Jan, huh?
You are on, Irene. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Welcome everybody to Garden Talk. We're going to be talking about playing in the dirt, benefits and hazards of gardening. And before we get started, I just was wondering, who got you interested in gardening? And what got you hooked on growing things? How long have you been a gardener? And what keeps you going at it? Well, I was about 10 when my mom sent me over to a neighbor's house to help her with her garden. She was a little old German lady with a heavy accent and bright, sparkly blue eyes. And she had turned her whole backyard into a flower garden. And so I helped Mrs. Kleber with this and that in the garden. And I never went home without a little cutting or a little root division wrapped up in wet newspaper. So there was always something new. And she was teaching me about all of her different plants. This is what I found in my backyard in the fall. And they were under my oak trees. And so, like I said, always something new. So I had no idea what they were. And I did a bit of research and I found out that they were acorn plum galls. And I'm going to take myself off my video here and just let you look at some of my pictures. These are produced by a gall wasp. And instead of forming galls on leaves or stems, these gall wasps form their galls on the scaly caps of acorns. And then they mature, they fall to the ground. And the galls don't damage or stress the tree, according to the article that I read. So I thought, well, I'm going to cut one open. And lo and behold, inside, right in the center there, is where the embryo matures. And then it tracks out, as you can see, towards the upper side of the gall. And it escapes that way once it's a little wasp. That just amazed me. And it's all these amazing things.
I'll be gone for about an hour, so.
All righty. It should be over with by then.
This is what I found the other day under my hornbeam tree. I still don't know what it is. I did a quick research on it and couldn't find anything. So if you know what this is,
enjoy your lunch.
Put it in the chat box and thank you in advance. Gardening helps me capture that sense of wonder that the natural world evokes. And as I explore plants and the environment that they grow in, I am just always awed by how complicated and how beautiful nature is. So with every activity, there will be benefits and there will be risks. And so it is with gardening. And today we will explore the benefits and the risks of playing in the dirt. So what we're covering today, benefits, I broke them down into physical health benefits and mental health benefits. And I'm going to include in each of those different behavioral health issues. The risks of gardening are myriad, it seems. Exposure to cold, exposure to sun, heat-related, overexertion and falls, hearing loss and lacerations, respiratory complications, the risks of composting at home, always insects that could bite you or sting you, ticks could attach to you and bite you, bacterial diseases, soil transmitted helminths. And if you can't wait to hear what those are, if you don't have a lot of biology background, those are the worms that are parasitic and can infect people and dogs and cats. Soil contaminants, pesticides and herbicides. Greywater use in the garden presents its own set of risks. Dangerous and poisonous plants in the garden. And last but not to be left out, special consideration for children in the garden. So physical health. Gardening can help you be your healthiest self. And a systematic review indicated that gardening had a positive effect on body mass index reduction in adults. School gardens also had a small but positive impact for participating children. Gardening is going to help you change your lifestyle and change your health behaviorally. Gardeners tend to make better food choices. They eat more vegetables. They have an increased willingness to try new vegetables, and they tend to decrease the numbers of processed foods that they eat and also their meat consumption. Vitamin D. Your skin uses sunlight to make one of the nutrients that everyone needs. It's a requirement. You can't get it any other way except in vitamin D fortified milk. And you'll need 600 to 800 international units a day. If you go out in the sun will help your body through your skin produce natural vitamin D. And a half an hour in the sun can rack up 8,000 to 50,000 international units in one go. And that depends, of course, on how much of your skin is exposed and how much melanin you have in your skin. Melanin tends to reduce sunlight absorption. So vitamin D is essential for literally hundreds of body functions. And the one that we pretty much know most is that it combines with calcium to strengthen our bones. But it also boosts your immune system and is essential for serotonin production, the chemical that alters the mood in our brains. Improve flexibility, endurance, and muscle strength. Working in that garden uses every major muscle group in our bodies. And this fact won't surprise anyone who's woken up sore after a day in the garden. Improved sleep. Researchers at the University of Pittsburgh reported that people who garden are more likely to get 7 solid hours of good sleep at night. Improved cognition. Doctors have known for some time that exercise improves cognitive functioning in the brain, and new evidence in new studies shows that gardening activities specifically may spur growth in your brain's memory-related nerves. Heart health and blood pressure. According to the CDC, everybody should be getting 2.5 hours of moderate intensity level activity a week. And it can reduce the risk of high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, and premature death. The CDC considers gardening a moderate intensity level activity, so gardening is going to help you be heart healthy. Gardening reduces the risk of Alzheimer's disease. There's a long-term study out there that followed 3,000 adults ages 60 and older for 16 years. And researchers discovered that daily gardening can reduce the risk of dementia by as much as 36%. Scientists believe that this is because gardening engages multiple areas of the brain at the same time, including those responsible for learning, problem solving, and sensory awareness. In mental health and moods, studies show that gardening can lower your stress level. Older adults who gardened reported less perceived stress than indoor exercisers with the same reported level of social support and physical activity. It can improve your self-esteem and your mood. As little as 5 minutes in a green environment, including gardening, improve both self-esteem and mood in respondents to the surveys. As I was doing some research for this, I came across an interesting podcast by Dr. Seth J. Gillihan. It's called Think, Act, Be, And he was being interviewed by Psychology Today. And the topic of his interview was the 10 mental health benefits of gardening. I haven't actually listened to this podcast, but I've saved the link and plan to get into it as soon as I find the time. There's so much to do in the garden. Some of the topics that Dr. Gillihan covered were gardening offers us the opportunity to practice acceptance, the art of letting go of things that are beyond our control. It helps us to move beyond perfectionism. Perfectionism can lead to frustration, missed deadlines and opportunities, and strained relationships. It can lead to not even trying, with the mentality of why bother, I can't make it perfect. Gardening, with its countless unpredictable factors, offers endless opportunities to tamp down perfectionism. Gardening fosters a growth mindset. It provides the opportunity to constantly learn. When something doesn't work out as planned, gardeners view it as a learning opportunity, not a failure. Mistakes in the garden empower us to keep learning and growing. Gardening helps us connect with others. We share this common experience. There's so much to talk about when you meet another gardener, not just the basics of our gardens, like what we're growing, but the emotional and the spiritual connections that we experience with our gardens. It helps us connect to our world. Having a garden means having a relationship with that little plot of ground or that big plot of ground that you're taking care of. You need to know the weather. You need to know the first and last frost dates. You need to see the cycle of the seasons and how it's going to affect your plants. You need to know where the sunlight is going to fall in the garden at this particular time of day. Will your plant be able to tolerate that much sunlight? Does it need a little bit more shade? An interesting concept is Shinrin-yoku. It's a Japanese expression that translates to forest bathing or bathing in green. It captures the experience of being immersed in green, in nature. A growing body of research has found many benefits from being in natural landscapes or just being able to even look out on a green landscape from indoors. Better recovery from surgery for patients, less anxiety and depression, better stress management. Several countries, including New Zealand, Canada, and some European nations, now allow for green prescriptions to be issued as alternatives to medication. These directives from doctors to their patients are to spend a certain amount of time outdoors each day or each month. And it's an acknowledgement of the very real health benefits that venturing into nature can offer. Being present, mindfulness. It increases your ability to live in the moment. Gardening can be a protected activity, one where we practice being where we are and doing what we're doing and thinking about what we're doing while we're doing it. Being in the moment. It has a centering effect, and it causes a lot of people to experience a very peaceful, calm feeling within themselves. Another new concept for me while I was doing research on this is geosmin. Had never heard the term before. It's a chemical that's produced by microbes in the soil. As they break down plants, it gives off that healthy soil smell. It's the characteristic odor of good dirt. It lends the earthy taste to beets and carrots. And essentially, it's the flavor of life. The microbe, Mycobacterium vaccae, is a living creature that produces the geosmin, which acts like a mind-altering drug once it enters the human body. It's been shown to boost the levels of serotonin and norepinephrine circulating in the systems of mice in labs, but also in humans in the clinics. In other words, it works in much the same manner as an antidepressant drug. And yes, it is possible to dose yourself by simply breathing in the smell of good dirt. Now we turn to the dark side, the risks of gardening. For a very British take on the risks of gardening and a bit of a tongue-in-cheek review of what can go wrong when humans decide to mess around in nature, visit the BMJ opinion blog at the address on the screen. Nearly all human activity has its dangers, and gardening is certainly a lot less hazardous than most. Knowing the hazards and simple precautions to take will help us as gardeners enjoy our work while minimizing the risk. Overexposure to the cold. It can aggravate Raynaud's syndrome and scleroderma. It can produce chilblains if you're out there in cold, nasty, damp weather. It can cause hypothermia. Prevention is pretty simple. Use some common sense and don't go out there when it's raining and sleeting, and wear weather appropriate clothing if you decide that you just have to put that garlic in and it's late October and the temperatures are crazy. That would be me last fall, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it was me, and it was cold. Sun overexposure. Well, spending time in the garden on a hot sunny afternoon is going to lead to a sunburn unless you take precautions. Individuals at higher risk are children, fair-skinned individuals, obviously, and those who are taking medications. You'll be surprised to find that quite a few medications can increase your body's chances of developing a sunburn. They are photoreactive for your skin. Some of these include tetracycline antibiotics, antihistamines, nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, that includes ibuprofen, tricyclic antidepressants, retinoids, hypertension medication, cholesterol-lowering medication, antifungals, and even medicated shampoos that have coal and tar derivatives in them. Oral contraceptives, hormone replacement therapy, and some cancer chemotherapeutic drugs also cause your body to be more light sensitive. Even some dietary supplements, ginkgo biloba and St. John's wort, fall into that category. Prevention, not too difficult. You want to use sunscreen and reapply it as needed. Use an SPF of 30 or above. Some of the ones that you see that are way up there, 70, 80, 90, they're a little bit on the overkill. 30 is usually adequate if you reapply it as recommended on the bottle. Some are more sweat resistant or water resistant than others. So read your bottle, see how often they recommend that it be reapplied. Wear a hat and loose lightweight clothing that covers your arms and your legs, and avoid gardening during the hottest hours of the day. Heat-related conditions. We'll start out with the least severe and move to the more severe. Dehydration is loss of water balance in the body. Symptoms are dizziness, lethargy, headache, confusion, and concentrated urine. As we move up in intensity, heat exhaustion. You have all the same symptoms for dehydration, only now we have excessive sweating. Your skin becomes cool, pale, and clammy. You may experience nausea and vomiting. Your pulse is rapid and weak. and you may experience muscle cramping. And now to the most severe, heat stroke. Add a throbbing headache, more nausea and vomiting, no sweating now. Your body has lost the capacity to sweat at this point. Your skin is red and hot and dry, and your core temperature may be 103 or more. You've probably lost consciousness by now, and you could be having seizures. Some gardeners are at higher risk for dehydration and heat-related stress. Those include generally infants and children up to 4 years of age, people over 65, people who are overweight, and those with underlying health issues. And again, medications are the culprits here too. There are a number of medications that affect your body's ability to regulate fluids and dissipate heat. Some that are included here are allergy and migraine medications, some blood pressure medications, diuretics, water pills, medications for the treatment of depression and other mental health illnesses, and meds that are used in attention deficit and hyperactivity disorders. Prevention, you want to start preventing dehydration before it even gets started. And you certainly don't want to be progressing to heat stroke. You want to drink plenty of water and consider rehydrating with an electrolyte solution such as Pedialyte or sports drinks or water, even water with just a little bit of added salt. Wear loose, lightweight clothing to keep your body cool. Take frequent breaks if you're out and it's a very sunny day. Sit in a shady area for a bit. Schedule your outdoor activities carefully. Try to avoid times of the day when the sun is the most intense and the heat is the most intense. And consider using a buddy system if you're going to be out there during a very hot time of day. That way you can keep track of how they're doing and they can keep track of how you're doing. Overexertion and falls. Poor body mechanics, repetitive motion, you end up falling. Improper lifting and lowering can lead to tendonitis, sprains, and even breaks. Repetitive motions such as raking, hoeing, digging, picking, bending, squatting, the list goes on. You're going to end up sore. Pulled muscles, strains, sprains, aggravated carpal tunnel. Falls, just the uneven terrain of your garden. And you know, those gardening tools, they always tend to get underfoot if you're not paying attention. Falling on your tools, not recommended. Prevention, review your body mechanics. They're good body mechanics. It's easy, just look it up online. It'll give you a demonstration of how to lift and how to put down. And if it's too heavy, ask for help. Stretch a little bit before you start your gardening. Limber up a little, get your muscles ready for some work. Limit the time you spend on any one task so that you're not overstraining the same muscle group. Start slow. In the spring, I know everybody wants to get out there and get gardening, and you end up with sore muscles the next day. So try to start slow. Increase your gardening time as you build strength and stamina. Stay focused. Know the terrain of your garden plot. Know where you're at in your garden. Pay attention. Move a little bit more slowly. Take a look around before you start running through the garden. Store your tools safely. Put them in spaces where you can see them and not just on the ground somewhere. Hearing loss and lacerations. I know this is an odd couple to put together, but power tools, mowers, gas-powered string trimmers, chippers and shredders, rotary tillers and chainsaws, they all operate at above 80 decibels. And repeated exposure to noise that's above 80 decibels can cause permanent hearing damage. Eye injuries from flying debris. We're whacking down those weeds. We're cutting into the dirt. Things are flying, stones are coming up. Cuts and lacerations happen. Wear the right gear. Get ready for it. Eye and ear protection in the yard. Cover up those arms and legs and know how to use the power tools that you've bought and are having fun with. Respiratory complications. Breathing in spores and dust from dry bagged compost or potting soils. Fungal spores can be released, particularly where the mulches or compost have been in a warm, enclosed space for a while, storing them in your garage or in the shed out back. Cleaning out a greenhouse or can dislodge mold from containers, and it's likely to release spores into the air, which can act as a trigger for asthma. Wear suitable face masks if you can to prevent you from breathing in that dust and spores. Make sure that your work area is well ventilated. Take that back out, the bag of compost out into the yard maybe and open it there. There are some risks to composting at home. And establishing a healthy compost takes some know-how. So do your homework. Go to the Environmental Protection Agency's website on composting basics. The address is right there on the screen. You want to be savvy about that compost. Droppings from rats and mice that might nest in a too dry compost, or a compost that has the wrong mix of organic waste materials that might be too wet. An unhealthy compost may give off spores. When it's too wet, it's probably growing fungus. Dust from too dry leads to respiratory illnesses. So, prevention, do your homework, learn how to establish a healthy compost. Always wear gloves and wash your hands after you work with the compost. And gardeners with a known history of asthma should probably avoid composting at home. Insect bites and stings. Most insects in the garden are harmless. Even insects that can sting, such as bees and wasps, generally aren't much of a problem if they're just left alone. But some gardeners have allergies to stings, and allergies may develop at any time. Symptoms are difficult breathing with swelling at the site of the sting. Prevention and treatment, be mindful of the presence of pollinators in your garden and make room for them. Wash bites and stings with soap and water and be sure to remove the stingers. For those with known allergies, you should probably keep an EpiPen or other allergic medications handy. And call 911 or emergency services number for your area immediately for anybody that's experiencing difficulty breathing. Ticks. Ticks are parasitic arachnids. They're related to spiders. And here in Western New York, tick populations are high. Ticks are vectors for at least 11 different infections. And the causative agents may be bacterial, viral, or protozoan. Lyme disease is probably the most common of the tick illnesses in the Northeast. And they are passed to humans from an infected tick bite. The bacterium is Borrelia burgdorferi. The symptoms of Lyme disease are fever, chills, headache, muscle aches. The typical bullseye rash may or may not be present. You usually will get redness and swelling at the site of the bite. Long-term Lyme disease that's gone untreated, can include fatigue, achy muscles, and cognitive defects. Prevention, wear long pants and a hat while gardening. Do a tick spot check after working in your yard. Learn how to safely remove a tick by visiting the CDC website on the screen there, and review WebMD's article on tick bites for more details. If you think you're experiencing symptoms of tick bite, seek medical attention. It can be treated with medications. Next up, let's turn our attention to some other common bacterial diseases and soil-transmitted helminth infections. The most common of the bacterial infections, and most of us have heard of this, is tetanus. It's caused by Clostridium tetani. It lives in the soil, and it can enter your body through wounds caused by thorny plants and sharp tools. In addition, wounds caused by animal or insect bites or have potential to cause tetanus. Symptoms begin with mild spasms in the jaw muscles, the traditional locked jaw, which intensify and become more painful and move down the body as the disease progresses. It can cause breathing problems and death if left untreated. You want to stay up to date on your tetanus vaccine. The CDC recommends that adults have tetanus boosters every 10 years. And according to their data, 53% of people in the United States aged 20 years and older are not adequately protected against tetanus. While working in the garden, wear thick, sturdy gloves. Wash your hands, wash your wounds, and seek medical attention if you're unsure of your vaccination status. Other soil-borne bacteria include E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella, Toxocara canis, Toxoplasmosis. We think of foods from our gardens as being clean, but in fact, our produce could be contaminated with bird or pet feces and may carry these diseases. Wild animals can get into the garden too, not just pets, cats and dogs. Their feces can present a serious health risk to people in general, but children and pregnant women are usually at a higher risk. You want to check our gardens for animal droppings on a regular basis. Only use well-composted manures to reduce the number of pathogens in it before it's incorporated into your soil. You take measures to prevent animals from entering your garden where possible. Wash your produce before eating it, especially produce that's going to be eaten raw. And wear gloves and wash your hands after gardening or adding compost to the dirt. Soil-transmitted helminths, STH. Our three most common parasitic worms are roundworm, whipworm, and hookworm. The infections from these worms are underdiagnosed and undertreated. In the United States, they estimate 14% of the people in the US are infected, but scientists believe that that number is probably higher. There have been no public health studies done on parasitic worms in the last 40 years. More often, these infections happen in poorer areas where sanitation and hygiene aren't optimal. Infections are treatable, but treatment doesn't prevent reinfection. We want to improve sanitation and hygiene in all of our gardening spaces. We want to avoid soil contamination by feces from wild animals, by pet animals, and by small children or anyone. We want to wash our vegetables and fruit before eating them, treat our pets that might have worms, and wear shoes in areas where contamination is considered likely. Symptoms for a helminth infection can be, it's on a range. Depends on how many worms a person is infected with. If you have a very light Helminth infection, chances are you're not going to have any symptoms at all. Heavy infections can cause a range of health problems, including abdominal pain, diarrhea, blood and protein loss, rectal prolapse, and physical and cognitive growth retardation in children. So keep our gardens clean. Soil contaminants. Inorganic contaminants such as lead, pesticides, and naturally occurring toxins may be present in relatively high amounts in soils. Before planting a city garden, the plots should be evaluated as to how this prospective site was previously used to identify any potential safety hazards. Exposure routes for inorganic contaminants can be inhalation, ingestion, and sometimes just skin absorption, where you get the contaminant on your skin and it can be absorbed in that way. Symptoms would be specific to the contaminant. Prevention. A site that's been used previously for industrial purposes should be tested so that you know what contaminants you may be dealing with, and consider, can the soil be remediated? Prevent children from ingesting soil. Know your crops and will they absorb the contaminant that might be in your soil? Different crops will chemically concentrate different types of compounds. Wash your vegetables carefully, and possibly even you may want to peel your root crops. Remove your soiled clothes and shoes before moving into your household, especially for things like lead that can be in the soil that's on your clothes. You don't want to build up of lead in your house. And remember, after you finish gardening, wash up. Pesticides and herbicides. Here are the chemicals that we add as gardeners sometimes to our plot of land. Every few years, more pesticides are banned as we discover the detrimental effects that they have on human health and the environment. The EPA has approved more than 200 chemicals for lawn and garden use, and some of these chemicals have been associated with birth defects, mutations, adverse reproductive effects, and cancer in laboratory animals. A prime example is glyphosate, the active chemical in the herbicide Roundup. Inorganic chemicals can have a sustained and negative ecological effect on our usage area, including contamination of area water sources. They can become concentrated in the soil, they can bind with soil, and under certain conditions, they can be released from that soil. A study that I came across while researching had to do with Parkinson's disease. And recent studies have found an increased incidence of Parkinson's disease in agricultural areas where paraquat has been used extensively. They feel that the environmental exposure may be an important triggering of the disease in persons who are genetically susceptible to it. We're learning something new every day. Prevention. Consider giving organic gardening a try. Learn to use natural methods such as companion planting to attract beneficial insects and trap crops to keep insect pests away from your coveted vegetables. But beware, organic gardening products are not food and they can be poisonous too. Use the right chemical for the right problem in the right amount, applied in the right way and at the right time. And if you've decided to use a chemical control and are unsure which product to use, be sure to consult an expert. Read the label on all garden chemicals because the label is the law. Greywater use in the garden. A lot of people like to save water that's been gently used from their bathroom sinks or their showers and tubs and washing machines, and they use it in their garden. It's common for this practice to be used in areas that suffer from water scarcity. Gray water may have a high bacterial content. Due to the detergents and dyes and bleaches, gray water may have a negative effect on vegetation and soil integrity. The risks: contamination of well water, if you're on a well system for drinking water, contamination of vegetable root crops that may concentrate some of these chemicals and detergents and incorporate them into the crop itself. And children and pets may come into contact with it, and its high bacterial content may adversely affect them. To avoid diseases or pathogens in gray water, it should be used with sensible precautions. The first and foremost is to know your local ordinance code. Are you even allowed to use this stuff? Use biodegradable detergents and soaps. Understand what water to exclude from your gray water, and it should always be used within 24 hours of its collection. Don't use it on food crops, and don't allow it to puddle under your plants where dogs might lap it up or children might play in it. Never use it in proximity to a drinking water source. Exclude water that may be contaminated with fecal matter or water that has high fat or protein content from food. Never use water that's been used for the care of persons with infectious disease. Dangerous plants, poisonous plants. Contact dermatitis. Numerous plants and their parts have been implicated in contact dermatitis. Symptoms include rash, redness, swelling, breaks in the skin. The severity of these depend on the sensitivity of the individual, the extent of the contact, and the condition of the plant or the plant product that's been in contact with. The most familiar plant that causes a dermatitis is poison ivy here in the Northeast, Toxicodendron radicans. But the list of culprits is extensive. One worth mentioning is giant hogweed. It's a very large and invasive plant. It prefers rich, damp soils, such as that found along railroad beds, roadside ditches, stream beds, or moist, disturbed areas. Giant hogweed can cause painful burns, permanent scarring, and blindness. Brushing against or breaking this plant releases the sap that, in combination with sunlight and moisture, can cause a severe burn within 24 to 48 hours. Giant hogweed is a federally listed noxious weed and can be found extensively in New York State. Genesee County has 33 active sites being monitored by the DEC. Could it be found in your garden or on your land? The answer is yes. Treacherous plants cut and tear at your skin. Check your plants with spiny leaves or thorns, such as cacti, roses, yucca, hollies, pyracantha. Avoid siting these plants next to a raised porch or a deck or steps, especially not next to play areas where children might brush against them. Poisonous plants. What's growing in your garden? Know your plants. And if you don't know a plant that crops up, find out what it is before you start pulling on it. Check to see if any of your plants have poisonous berries, leaves, corms, or flowers. Rhubarb and castor oil plants are well-known poisonous plants. Other common garden plants with poison potential include, just to name a few, our lovely little lily of the valley, wisteria. For the ladies and men who like to Keep houseplants, Dieffenbachia and philodendron. Daffodils, rhododendrons and azaleas, lovely hydrangea and oleander, water hemlock, and English yew, just to name a few. Know your plants, ladies and gentlemen. Child safety in the garden. Chemicals and poisons, sharp tools, physical hazards, definitely risks to children in the garden. Promote child safety in the garden by keeping chemicals out of their reach and out of their sight. Talk with your kids, educate them on the potential hazards in the garden. Let them know what's poisonous. Teach them how to use sharp tools safely. Fence off water areas for the little ones and plants. Fence them off too if they should be avoided. Remove dangerous plants if necessary, especially if they're close to play areas. So this presentation wasn't meant to be all-inclusive. It's more an overview of the benefits and risks to gardening. Gardening is one of the most healthy and relaxing ways to spend your leisure time. And knowing the risks and taking a few simple and basic precautions keeps gardening from becoming anything other than the healthy and enjoyable activity that it should be. So if you want to go with a splash of color, or if you want to go with Zen-like green for that Shinrin Yoku effect, go big or go small. If you want to bring a little bit of that green inside so you can just experience it at all times, or if you're into maybe making sure you have a bunny buffet out in your backyard and one that might even give you some produce for inside the house and a salad now and then. Or maybe you just want that huge expanse of lawn that's been meticulously groomed, that's just lovely to look at and soothing to the soul. Or maybe you just want to go crazy. Do your homework, do it right, and enjoy your time. Stay healthy, playing in the dirt.
Thank you, Irene. That was awesome. I don't know if I want to go outside again. No.
What's that? What's that?
I said, I don't know if I want to go outside again. No.
I tried to end on a positive note.
You did. You did. So let me check the chat. I don't think we've got no questions. So does anybody have a question for Irene? We are a small group, so feel free to unmute, ask Irene your questions. Does anybody here have questions? All right.
There's certainly tons of information out there on prevention. There's tons of things that weren't included in this presentation. I had to really try to narrow it down. So
I thought it was actually rather fascinating, especially thinking about some of the worms and parasites and things. I guess I don't think about that too much when I'm out digging in my healthy
there haven't been
soil.
any studies for 40 years.
I know.
If you go on the World Health Organization website about parasitic worms, there's no data for the United States. No
Wow.
data.
Wow.
And yet 14% and probably more
Higher,
people
yeah.
have worms.
I know. And I do keep my tetanus shot up to date, but 53% of the US not. I mean, yeah, it's something we forget about, but even just a scratch or just a scratch. I always think of things like stepping on a rusty nail or something like that, but just a scratch or walking into a cart at the garden center. Yeah.
I got a really bad, I wasn't wearing my gloves, I have to confess. I was trimming up a rose bush. I got a really nasty puncture wound from a thorn. And the next day it was just sore like you wouldn't believe. And I was more than 5 years out from my tetanus. I went and I got a
You got a
booster.
booster, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, these are all good reminders of things to just think about when we are outside, not to scare anybody off, but
It's
just,
it's very basic.
yeah.
I mean, I think almost every one of them was like, wash your hands when you're done gardening, you know?
Well, even if you're a birder too, if you feed birds in the yard, wash your hands whenever you fill feeders, because yes, bird feces can carry a variety of diseases that are transferable to humans.
Yeah.
So it's just a good reminder, wear gloves, wash your hands. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. All right, well, I don't see any questions coming in, so I'm gonna stop the recording. Bravo. And you're getting applause here. Yes, I want to stop.